Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa, and I'm a grandmother, also referred to as abuelita by my two granddaughters. And I'm a mom, and I'm a great aunt, and still have three siblings left in my life. I was born in 1939, and I was named after my paternal grandmother, which was Maria Elisa. My maiden name was Valdez. Later on, when I started working for the government, my supervisor changed it from Elisa to Lisa, and this is what I'm called now. I grew up with a nickname of Ella, E-L-L-A, and that's what I was in school until, my official birth certificate came out because I had to get a clearance with the government. There's so much at my age to talk about, and I think we would be here all day, and we don't want to do that. Overall, I am very blessed with good friends, environment, and being able to hold up after my husband died 8 years ago. I've always said to people, everybody carries a cross, and some are heavier than others. And so I think that's important to realize that you're not the only one carrying a cross. There's other people that are heavier. I've done a lot of things in my lifetime, from going to school, working, but most of all, I've done a lot of volunteer work. And that's the biggest gift I could give people that need help. I did hospice for 8 years here in Santa Fe, and I was a real support group for the American Cancer Society for breast cancer survivors. And now I'm limiting my volunteer work to an organization out of my Catholic Church, Treasures of Wisdom, which we have a grant that allows us to get seniors to do things with us, like going to spiritual places, meeting, and so forth. I also am an active member of the Spanish Trail Association because my great-great-grandfather was part of the Spanish Trail. And I've also, in the last 8 years, I joined the New Mexico Historical Society. At my age, I keep busy. My parents, primarily my father and I, were very close. And they placed values on our spiritual life. When I was young, my dad used to get us around the bed and we'd pray the rosary every night. My mother was a good mother, but she was more strict, but I learned discipline, and I learned a lot of things from her cooking, because everything she cooked, no recipes, just, head. But I would say that my father really taught me more than the values that I have now. Not only spiritual, but he always had this saying, and I use it now: vale más que tengas amigos, amigas, que dinero. It's better to have friends than money. Money can get away from you, but friends, if they're real friends, they stay with you till the end, And I like that saying that my dad had. I thought he was super good. Good friends, you don't want to lose them, And so his values were good. My mother had to go to a nursing home, so he lived alone, so we'd all take turns going to see her. And then I'd go clean house for my dad, cook some meals. And he went to Mass every single morning. He was a walker. He walked all over Albuquerque. And he died in 89. And my mother died in 91, shortly after that. But she was 96 and he was 91 or 92, yeah. But they taught me a lot of honesty, not to lie, even if it was for... I feel about lying that unless it's something that could have an impact on that person. For instance, if I have a friend and I saw her husband with another person, female, I would never tell her. If she would ask me, I would say, no, I didn't see anything, because it would hurt her. So those are the only times that I feel that I may have shaded the truth. I grew up in a farm in a very small community, and we had a lot of animals that, so forth. But I had a very happy childhood. It was during World War II, I was probably 5 or 6 years old. But I think what I carry with me is what it's like to have been in a farm in a small community. I was almost 8 years old before my mother allowed me to go to school because I was her baby. And I went to school in a little town called Savoya till I was in the 6th grade. But I had a happy childhood there. My English was kind of broken because all we did was speak Spanish. And I really didn't polish up my English until I started working for the government because my supervisor would say, "Don't be ashamed, you." So but anyway, so those were happy. The only, and I need to share this with you, that I had a scaring experience. My mother had sent me to collect the eggs from the barn, where there was this female cat that had just had kittens. And as I was walking with my little bucket with the eggs, the female cat jumped right on my shoulder. And oh my God, I got scared. I started crying. It seemed like I was there for eternity. My mother finally got worried. She sent my younger brother after me, and I was in tears. And to be quite honest with you, I have always had a fear of cats. I'm also allergic to them. When I see them, my skin just crawls up. So that was probably the most unfavorable experience I've ever had. The fact that the cat, and I mean, he didn't do anything except he didn't want me to get near his kittens. So, like I said, I went from first to 3rd grade, and then my dad moved us to Flagstaff, Arizona, and I went there 4th grade. We moved back to Savoya, and I went to the consolidated school until I was in the 6th grade, and then my dad moved us to Albuquerque. And I was there until I married Charles. We got married in 81, but I worked for the government for 2 different agencies. And I guess, just life went on. So I was very fortunate that during the time that I started working, they signed the Civil Rights Act, for employment discrimination and other things. So I was there at the right place. I worked for the Corps of Engineers as a clerk typist, stenography, and then I climbed up the ladder of civil rights. I was going to mention that during the time I started working in 59, I worked at a military base, but it was still for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. But a lady I worked with was really set on going to Lourdes. She had a devotion for a Lady of Lourdes. So she didn't have to twist my arm because I was ready. So we sailed in March, I believe, of 1959 on the Queen Mary. And we were very shy and very, I wouldn't use the word ignorant, but we were not used to what was going on. But we had met a friend at the Kirtland Air Force Base who picked us up at the airport, took us around, and then the next morning she took us to the Queen Mary, and we sailed on. And I loved it. The tour that I did was caravan tours. We covered 13 countries. But at the end of my tour, the priest from our parish had said, "Well, since you're going to go to Spain," and I was only going to be there a week, he says, "I want you to meet my nephew." So his nephew picked us up at the airport in Madrid, and we fell in love. I didn't want to come home. So we had a wonderful time. But then my dad called me and he said, "They called you from your job, and if you're not here at a certain time, you won't work for the government." Well, losing a job with the government was really important because, like, now I get the benefits of my retirement and medical insurance. So I came home and settled down, and shortly after that, I married my children's father. We had 3 children, and after 10 years, we dissolved the marriage. And then I was a single mom for almost 11 years. I raised my kids, and we traveled together a lot, the children and I, and we had a good time, we really did. By that time, my oldest son, Joseph, was very difficult to take care of because he was age level about 3 years of age, and he didn't understand things. And what really convinced me that he had to be in a group home was I had allowed him to take a nap during the day. And about 2 o'clock that morning, and this had a big impact on me, my doorbell rang. And it was a couple that lived down the street. He said it was so hot that we were sitting outside, and we saw this little boy playing with rocks. He was right in the middle of the street. So that was something scary. So I brought him in. Well, see, he knew so much and so little because I had one of those old-fashioned screen doors that latch, and he had gotten the broom and opened it. So then I brought him in. I put him in the same room I was, locked the door to that room, and stayed with him. But that pretty much woke me up to saying, I can't take care of him because I had two other children. So it took a lot for him to get into a group home because there was a lot of waiting list. And to be honest with you, I don't ever use politics, but in this case I did. My brother knew one of the senator's sister, and so we worked it out. But prior to him going into a group home, I had a lady taking care of him, and it was too much for him. She was from Mexico, and but even she had a hard because he was hyper. He just jumped all over the place. So once he went into a group home, I just had my other two children, and we did some traveling together. And my son Philip loved to travel. My daughter Maria, not really. She goes on trips if she has to, but my son Philip did, and my one granddaughter. We all like to travel. I think Maria could travel, but she's not for long trips. So anyhow, that was pretty much my time experience. And then, like I told you, in '82, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I had almost put 25 years in with the government, and I had to have surgery and 27 chemotherapy treatments. It was a decision that I had to make. Do I stay working? I really wanted to stay working because I was climbing up the ladder, and my retirement would be a lot bigger than it is now. But my husband, Charles, said, no, I don't want you to die at work. We can make it. So I took an early out, which still gave me the benefit of my insurance. And after 27 treatments, they finished. But just last year, I completed my 40th year of survival. And I was going to the UNM Cancer Center, because they're a research center, and the oncologist said, you'll be in a separate group now. If you ever need to come back, you can. But, you're done, pretty much. So I'm getting all my medical examinations here in Santa Fe. So, but I was fortunate because when my son Philip was in the hospital in San Diego, the oncologist there told me that with a type, because I had it written down what kind of cancer, she said, do you know you only had a 25% chance of survival? Well, at the time I didn't know that, So anyway, I think there was a purpose for me being here, taking care of my two sons, and taking care of my husband, and being myself. What can you say? I love to cook. That's one of my favorites. Well, my daughter called me one day and she said, I work with a lady that her son's moving to Santa Fe, and he doesn't know anybody there, and we adopted him. My husband and I adopted him. Well, the second time he came back, my husband had died. So anyway, I met Vince, and we've been friends since then. I met his parents. We've stayed together, done things together, and his friend Bonney. So I get friends that are wholesome and sincere, and I have a lot of acquaintances, but to say friends, real friends, I can count them in my fingers, So I do make people, I meet people. In Santa Fe, it was very difficult for me to meet people because the local people in Santa Fe, if you were not born and raised here, went to the Laredo Academy, they wanted nothing to do with you. And I went to the community college for 2 years here, and I'd go have coffee with a girl, and he said, well, you're not really a Santa Fean, I was a New Mexican, but not a Santa Fe. So actually the people that I got more acquainted with were my husband's customers, that he built houses for. Then, the volunteer work I did, patients, we didn't develop, we were warm, I took care of them, but it wasn't like we kept a friendship, and they would die soon enough where I'd get another patient. But I'll tell you, it was probably one of the most rewarding volunteer works I've ever done. Towards the very end, because there was very few volunteers back then that spoke Spanish, I was giving most of the Spanish non-English speaking patients. Most of them were old like I am now. But it was really, I learned so much from that. I really did, But then after my son died, I didn't want anything to do with hospice. So that's when I became a tour guide. I was a tour guide for almost 19 years. And then I did 2 museums. And I still do once in a while I do tours, but not often. I'm not committed to being at a certain place. But like out of towners that come, they always want me to do a little tour for them, and I'd be happy to. Because you don't forget history. You may stumble at times to get the information out, but you still remember it. And one of the things I learned through my tours, if you're asked a question and you don't know, you don't give them an answer. I always used to say, that's a very good question. I don't have the answer, but if you give me your telephone number or email, I will find out from our director here what the answer is, and I'll let you know. Because, there's nothing worse than to ask a question, give them the wrong answer. So I couldn't do that. No, it was a good experience for me, although all that was volunteer. My tours that I did for historic walks, mostly tips. But I've done a few since then. I started doing bus tours. But I enjoyed them, but I wasn't that familiar with some of the areas that we would go. So one time we got stuck in, I shouldn't call it a ghetto, but over there where the, very early houses were. And that poor bus couldn't get out. And I just had to use it and I said, well, now you know how some of the people live. But I was lost myself. So anyway, they had a lot of experiences that make you laugh, and you know that it happened, But since I stopped being that active, like I say, I belong to the 3 organizations I previously mentioned. I used to have meetings here at the house because with the Spanish Trail, and next month I'm going to Riverside because I also belong to the Descendants group, where and there was a book written, and I loaned it to my doctor, and there's a big chapter that I wrote about my great-grandfather, Santiago Chacon. He traveled, the Spanish Trail opened in 1829, and then it closed in 1848. But it was a rugged trail. They used to cover 6 states. And my great-grandfather lived in a community called Abiquiu, and he used to go with a caravan and go to Los Angeles to exchange the goods, native goods from New Mexico, for horses. And the horses were brought back and sold to the Middle Eastern people at a very high price. But on his last trip in 1846, they were ambushed by the Paiute Indians, and my grandfather was killed, and great-grandfather, and in Resting Springs, between the Nevada and Los Angeles border. After we moved from Savoia to Albuquerque, I was in the 7th grade, and I had a difficult time because, like I said, my English was very poor, and I went to a public school, and of course kids naturally make fun of you. But eventually, when I really polished up my English, I would go tell them, I'm smarter than you. I know 2 languages. How many do you know, And I kind of used a little bit of revenge on them. So that was very important. But I would say that my high school and grade school years were not really something that I enjoyed. I went because I had to. I went 2 years to Catholic school. Nuns were very strict. And then went to a public high school. But high school was not anything that I can say, oh, I had a good time, da-da-da. Because there was a group of, like in any school, where there were cheerleaders and things like that. And, I concentrated on my studies, but my social was very limited. But once I graduated, and my first job was with a hospital, and that was an interesting experience. I met new patients. And then when I got my civil service call, of course, it was better pay. So I moved on to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I did a lot of things with my girlfriends. We'd go to the state fair, which I think is just ending tomorrow, or did. And we used to take a shuttle bus would pick us up from the YWCA and take us to Kirtland Air Force Base, the NCO Club, so we could do some dancing and meet some of the soldiers, and they'd bring us back. So It was a fun time. My mother was very strict because my dad always worked out of town, and he really put a guilt trip on her. If anything happens to those girls, it's all your fault. So I had a deadline. And let me give you an example. One time, because I also worked at a drive-in theater as a cashier, and one time, some friends, I got home about an hour late when my mother locked me out. I had to sleep in the porch. And it wasn't the best neighborhood. My brother Ray, my older brother, came in and he was fit to be tied with my mother. You can't leave her out there, It's dangerous. The screen door was so thin. So that was an experience that I don't like to talk about, but it happened. But, she was strict. She used discipline on us. And though I would say that I was close to her, I mean, she had never ridden in an airplane, and one of my conferences in Denver, I took her with me, and she was beside herself. So I try to do things with them, but see, once I moved to Santa Fe, it was a lot harder for me to we'd take turns every week, one of the brothers or sisters would go. But that pretty much, and then I married Charles. I returned back to the state that was in Spain, and I was dating my children's father at that time. So he proposed to me, and needless to say, I should have waited, but I didn't. So my first son was born when I was 22. And from the moment he was born, we realized there was something wrong. And then his sister, who's still alive, Maria, she was born in 62. And then my son Philip was born in 63. And both Philip and Joseph required a lot of my attention. Joseph was hyperactive, so eventually I had to get him into a group home, which they treated him very good. Maria didn't need any help. She was, And then Philip had cystic fibrosis, which required a lot of medical attention. He'd sleep in a tent, respiratory tent. And honestly, he did very good until he was 41. When we was first diagnosed, the doctor said, look at 3 to 5 years for him. Well, the time kept going. When he was about 16, his pediatrician said, I'm going to start guessing. And, then he did have to go to San Diego and get a double lung transplant. I moved to San Diego to be with him. And then he returned to Santa Fe and did real, real good. But after 10 years, the medication he was taking caused him to get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So that's probably one of the most difficult journeys I've been through, his passing away, because we were very close and he was my baby. But then, right now I would say I have a lot of support. My niece Crystal and my 2 granddaughters, even though they're not with me, and my daughter Maria. I feel that I'm loved. And I think one of the biggest pluses for me is that I have a lot of acquaintances, but I have close friends, friends that you never forget. All in all, I think in spite of, my children being sick and death in the family, I've had a very good life. I really have. I'm comfortable in my home that my husband built for me. I'm not rich by any means, but I can support myself, Santa Fe is not it's an expensive place to live, You're talking, especially now after COVID, the groceries have gone way high. I'm paying more for groceries now that I'm alone than when my husband was alive. But, overall, I do like to attend functions, fundraisers. And, I just keep busy. I mean, I really do. I can't do too much physical work anymore based on my arthritis and other issues, but I'm still walking and I can see. I think my biggest loss was my hearing. I mean, I can hear, but not too well. Well, the challenges were this way. It's not always going to be that way. Things are going to get better. One of the most heartbreaking days for me was the day the doctor told me that Joseph would never go past the age of 3, and that we'd have to put him in a institution group home. It was very heartbreaking because he was my first child. Well, I knew what I had to do, give him up, and so forth. And then he was, Philip was 41, Joseph was, I don't think, yeah, he was almost 50, and he suffered a lot. So that was, the tough thing for me has been to see my children suffer with pain. Oh, you almost wish you could change and that it would be you instead of them. And both of them had very painful death, based on the nature. So one day when I was in San Diego, when and Philip was waiting for his new lungs, I got really down. So I walked over to the AAA office. That's where they used to give you all kinds of pamphlets. So I came to the apartment and I traveled all over with my pamphlets. And that eased my depression, because, I guess traveling has been a way for me to endure things because I love traveling. I like to learn the history. So I think that was one of the reasons why. And of course, I joined this group called the Legions of Mary, and I used to go to their meetings. And between religion, traveling, and I'll be quite honest, my siblings were not that supportive. I'm not very close to my siblings. I love them, but not to the point of where I depend on them. Now, the second generation, their children are great, and I don't want that, to be a big issue. But so when I was there, I met Barbara, my friend, and I met some interesting people in San Diego, and I lived in an apartment which was about 4 blocks from the hospital. And April 1, 1996, he called me and he said, "Mother, they just called me. I have a new lungs." And he talked, and then he said, "April Fool." And I said, "Philip, this is nothing to talk about." Well, on April the 15th, he called me and he said, "Mother, I got my new lungs." And I said, "This isn't funny anymore." No, I really did. So we rushed to the hospital. And, as luck would have it, it was the year that Southwest Airlines was having their 25th anniversary, and they were selling tickets for $25. So I had stacked up some tickets for Charles to go. He arrived that morning. Philip got his new lungs. He was in the hospital from about midnight to the next day. So it just worked that he was there. My daughter Maria went, and it was impact on my life, but in a good way. He survived. So, and Charles was supportive of Philip. And I'm not saying my siblings weren't, but even now, if I don't call them, they'll never call me. I told because I have 2 brothers left, and I called my brother the son, and I said, it'd be nice if you can still dial the phone and call me. And he started laughing. But I'm always the one that has to do that, which is no big deal because the daughters and sons more than be part of my life. Well, there was space, the shepherd and all that. That was, but one of the things that happened locally, we had a gentleman that wanted land grants, and he raided the Terra Maria because that's where the county office. And I remember that because they had to get the sheriffs and so forth to go around interviewing people. And so it was a big deal because we knew the people that were there. In fact, the sheriff was killed. So that happened. But I'm trying to think the first time I remember the first president, I remember that I think it was Roosevelt, but I was too, it was because my daddy just was really fond of Roosevelt. He came home in tears and he said he just died, So, but then from Roosevelt on Truman, and then I was knowledge about the president. But one of the things that I impacted that really made a lot of difference is that John F. Kennedy came to Albuquerque, and my dad wanted to see him, so we went. In a caravan, and a lot of presidents elected or came to Albuquerque. So I made it a point of seeing them, and when Charles and I would travel, I'd make sure that I went to almost all the libraries of all the presidents. I have a list of all of them, because it's impressive, It was interesting to see some of the older presidents, that made an impact on our world. There's so, but significant, like I said, it was the space, in the raid I told you about. I don't think there was as much crime, and if there was, I didn't know about it as there is now. You know, Albuquerque has become real tough, but I think every other city has. My first job was cleaning house next door. There was a Jewish family that lived there. They had a grocery store, and I was a housekeeper. And then her sister-in-law had needed a babysitter. So my friend Lisa and I would have to take a bus and take turns babysitting. Well, it turns out that one of the young men that we babysat with is podiatrist. And he was 2 years old when we took care of him, so he had an office here in Santa Fe. I mean, it's really interesting. So that was like about my first job. Then I worked at drive-in theaters. And one year my sister said, well, they need cashiers at the state fair. Why don't you go work? Freezing cold, I went. By the time that they checked out the booth, they said there was money missing. I didn't get paid anything. So that was a no-no. Really? Oh, and then my job when I got out of high school was at the hospital, Presbyterian Hospital. And I worked there not even a year, and then I got my call from civil service. And then I started to work for 10 years with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And then what really I thought about, because the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is an agency that protects employment that have been workers discriminated. And one of the biggest investigations I used to do was sexual harassment, but that was one of the most difficult ones to prove because very few would come out and say that. I mean, I did have one informant that we took all the way to court and she won. But what really kind of bothered me is that some of the big shots there with the agency, they sexually harassed some of the younger girls. And I thought that was terrible, you know, because they're supposed to be implementing it, and instead they're using it. But like I said, I investigated a lot of sexual harassment cases, but it was the most difficult, you know, because a lot of people that I would call to interview, they were scared to talk because they would maybe lose their jobs, you know. But unless, one of the things that I found out is this particular male or female had harassed others, that it gave credibility to the person that had filed that complaint. And that's why I wrote that paper that, you know, talking about civil rights. I was sexually harassed by the personnel director, and I thought, if I report him, they'll believe him. I'm just a little clerk type. I mean, that was with the Corps. EOC, you know, I had more of a professional job, so it wasn't, you know. I met Charles because I had a vehicle car that was always in the garage. So I asked one of my coworkers if he'd give me a ride home. And he said, yeah, but we have to stop by a house first because my builder's there. And of course, that was Charles. And he told me he was from Alamosa, Colorado. My parents had lived there. So we got to talking, and that was the end of that. After the Charles and him finished art, my friend took me home. Well, about 2 weeks later, Charles called me. He loved to dance. And I used to go dancing with some girlfriends, you know, just us girls. And he said, do you want to go out for dinner? And I said, yeah. I mean, I have nothing better to do. Well, on our first date, he was very forgetful, and he forgot my address. And I waited almost like 45 minutes for my date to arrive. I finally called Art, the gentleman that worked with me. Is it tonight or is it another day? Well, about that time, Charles came and he said, I'm so sorry. He said, I forgot your address. And finally he came in with the most funny experience. The first time he went to the house, Maria and Philip were going into a big fight in front of him. And Charles said, I couldn't figure out why you let a little boy like him really take advantage of your little girl. And I guess because I gave him extra attention because of his sickness, you know. So that was our first date. But it was not an easy relationship, I'll be honest with you, because he lived in Alamosa and I lived in Albuquerque. But he had another girlfriend, and it was kind of competitive, you know. So after 2 or 3 years, I said, I can't do this anymore. I mean, I'm done, you know. But then I think his girlfriend from Alamosa moved to Denver, and then we started a healthy relationship. So we got married in 81 in Alamosa, Colorado. He had just built a brand new Holiday Inn. And then, but we didn't get married by the Catholic Church because I had not received an annulment. He had his annulment, but I didn't. So we had a beautiful wedding, dancing and all that. But he was a long distance married for a long time because I'd go to Alamosa, but not that often, and he'd come here to Albuquerque. But it was hard on him after a day's work. So we went out that way, and then when I got cancer and I retired, it became easier because I didn't, you know, we moved to Santa Fe in 93. But it was a joyful, Charles was a lot of fun. He liked to do things. He didn't care that much about traveling, but he would travel with me. And one time my dad asked him, how did he said, how can you get any work done with all the places my daughter takes you to? And he told me that. But then for a while, he started to complain a lot about our trips. So one year I didn't plan anything, and at the end of the year he said, where are we going this year? And I said, Charles, we're not going any place because you were complaining about it. I mean, to most places he went with me, but the one he regretted not going to was to South Africa. Because, you know, he didn't like to get up early. And he thought he'd have to get up real early. But we had a good marriage. We were married almost 32 years before he died. We spent a lot of time in San Diego on a part-time basis. I mean, we would have moved there full-time. Life in San Diego was good. You know, I learned a lot about it. I used to walk a lot. And there's times that he was still running a business here in Santa Fe building. So there's times that he would come and I'd stay there. And then in 95, when Philip had to get a double lung transplant, it was the year that the market was terrible. You know, we were really poor. So we had to rent this house in order to get some income. And he moved to a place that he was remodeling. So I rented an apartment in San Diego and stayed with Philip until he got his new lungs. But then after that, you know, it wasn't a hardship anymore. I really wanted him to stay, Philip, in San Diego because of the sea level, but he wanted to come to New Mexico. So, and he was not alcoholic, he was a workaholic. He never knew where to start. But him and Charles did some jobs together because he was a master electrician, my son. And yeah, it was, you know, a second marriage can only be difficult if you make it that way. He had 3 daughters. And the youngest one was very difficult to deal with. She'd been adopted, and she never forgot that. And she lived with us for a while there. The second to the oldest daughter, which both her and I were trusted, she's been great with me, really great, you know. So it was not, you know, a lot of times when there's children involved, the person dies, there's a lot of struggles. But he had a trust, so, you know, we followed the trust to the very end, you know. But I would say we did a lot of fun things. He loved to do road trips. Oh, we used to do a lot of road trips because he liked to drive. We moved here in 93. But one of the things that I have to mention is, like I said earlier, did not want to move to Santa Fe. I didn't have anybody there. But when we first moved here, my husband would stage houses, and we moved from house to house. And that was difficult for me. So the last time he moved, I said, look, Charles, I have enough real estate in Albuquerque, and I want you to build my own house, which is where I live now. And I said, because I want to be able to die here and live here. And so I had to borrow a little bit of money from the bank, but I accomplished him building my house at my own expense and him working with me. But he built his house in a year's time, and I've been here now. He built it in 93. We had to sell the one house we were living in, and we moved here, and I'm very comfortable here, you know, really nice. My son Philip got married, and he was very happy, and he had a wonderful wife who was not aware of his sickness. And I think, he died and they were still married. Now, my daughter Maria, I think she had a difficult time because her daughter Aubrey's dad had some problems, issues, and he was sent away, for a while, and she had to work to keep things going. I think my daughter Maria always wanted to have a companion. So then she was working at St. Joseph's Hospital in Albuquerque, and she used to run a lot of, and so is her present husband, Gus Appenzeller. So they built up a relationship, and she wanted a baby so bad, and he didn't care because he was a single, and his favorite one was his dog. So that's when she had Rachel. But I would say, to me, a very important part of marriage is, for me, is that the person is a Christian, even if he's not Catholic, whatever religion he belongs to, that he believes in God. Also, I just listened to Archbishop that gave the eulogy for Clinton, and he said that one of the most important part of our lives is compassion, to show compassion for people. Feels, I don't know how to explain this. There's times that I don't have compassion. But most of the times I do if I see, there's a lot of, some homeless who moved here. And I feel sorry for them, but some of them look perfectly normal, but I think most of those homeless are either drug addicts or mentally ill, so. But no, I had a very good relationship for 10 years alone with my two children, because by that time Joseph had gone into group home. So, and we traveled together. And I had a friend, and she's out of town. She lives in Albuquerque, Sharon. And her kids were the same age as my kids. So we used to do a lot of things together, But no, we had a happy life. We really did. I had to I had a lady from Mexico that took care of them when I was working. And then they started school. So, no, it was fine. By the time that, when Philip graduated from high school, he moved to Florida. And he was a driver at the school for one of the colleges there. He traveled all over. And then he went to school to become an electrician, and he became a master electrician. And by that time, he was pretty much all grown up. Both my parents were very devout Catholics, and they believed, that prayer was the answer to just about everything. But our traditions are like, in a sense, it's hard for me to identify the traditions I have that my parents left me, but a tradition that we've always kept was, of course, prayer and being compassionate people. That was a tradition that my mom and dad always had. My dad was a volunteer with St. Vincent de Paul, which fed the hungry. My mom didn't do much in volunteer work. But as far as things that they did, I guess baking was a tradition, and my mother was a good cook. But I can't think of a specific thing that they did that has been carried out. My oldest brother, would probably know a lot more about that. Well, first of all, the one person that really impacted my life, when my children were sick and I was about to have a breakdown, I called the Catholic Church in Albuquerque, and the priest who answered the phone said, "We can't do this by phone, come on over." So we still remain friends. He's not a priest, he lives in Las Vegas, but he had the greatest impact in my life. He suggested a book that I have, and I grew up with some of the teachings he did. His name, Father Mondragon. He lives in Las Vegas, but he traveled through different parishes. And I would say that he had the impact that he made me understand what suffering was about. He also gave a bright picture of life. And he was amazing. He really was. My niece, Crystal, has had a big impact in my life. In the sense that she's always helping me, listening to me. But I would say that the person that really gave me was Father Mondragon. you know. And I see him once in a while because one of our parishioners, eye doctor, they knew him. So we go once in a while to Las Vegas to see him. I think he opened my mind that suffering is throughout the world from the beginning of time until the best. Everybody takes suffering different. Some people complain about their suffering. Some people take it in stride and they deal with it the best way they can. But at one point, I think he might have suggested that we may do our suffering here on earth and not be penalized to suffer more, when we die. So, I mean, he used the example of the crucifixion and so forth. But he brightened up the thought of suffering instead of being feeling sorry for yourself or this type of thing. So I would say Father Mondragon, and I have a picture with him I'll show you before we leave. So anyway, I'd say he had the biggest impact on my life. I think honesty is one of the biggest things you can talk about. I think remembering special things that you do with your family, eventful things. And I always pray for their safety because, Aubrey drives, Maria drives. So I always leave that about never forget whatever religion you're at, look up and get help from there. I would say that my children, my grandchildren, and Crystal and her daughters are the ones I want to leave a message to. Always live on with life and take care of yourself and your loved ones and try to stay healthy. But I love all of them very much. I wish I could see more of Maria, but she works real hard. She doesn't want to retire until a later time. She's 61 now. But she loves her job. She's a speech pathologist and works with a lot of patients. So I would say I want to leave a message that they've been a very important part of my life, and without them, I would be very lonely. Like I told you last night, Crystal said that when Charles died, she would call me every morning to make sure I was still alive because I said, I don't want to die and smell and somebody come in, make sure that I'm still, alive. And one day she called me and couldn't get a hold of me, so she called my neighbor. At the time, because I forget sometimes, and at the time that she called, he was coming over to check on me. So like I say, she never leaves me alone. She never does. One of the memories that I will always live with, it makes me laugh, is my granddaughter, Aubrey, of about 4 years of age or 3. I used to babysit Aubrey a lot. And one of the funniest things at that time was she was just a little girl walking around saying everything she wanted. Well, Charles had some of the realtors from Santa Fe have a meeting in Albuquerque at our house. And the minute they walked in, she said, you know what? My grandma only has one boob. She don't have the two of them. And I thought, oh my God. And I mean, she just went on and on. And I finally picked her up. I said, let Grandpa do his business. But I mean, I still think of it and I find it extremely funny because she had to tell a story. She was part of it. The other thing that makes me laugh, not significant enough, is when I travel with Crystal, and she uses her little navigator a lot. My sister-in-law died, and she lived in Paradise Hills, which is a little separated from Albuquerque. Well, she put the name of the church, but she didn't put Paradise. And so we weren't running late. We had plenty of time. And we got to the church all the way out of town. I said, Crystal, this isn't the place. Well, I said you were supposed to put Paradise Hill. So we laughed. I mean, it wasn't that funny, but it was just, she does a lot of humor things without even thinking about it. She really does. Now, Aubrey doesn't joke that much, and Rachel, not either. But I always remember what the childhood was with Aubrey advertising my health. I think that's the one that makes me giggle. There's a lot of things that Charles and I share together that used to make me laugh. Sometimes he said, I don't find any humor in that. And I'd say, well, I do. But for the most part, I think that's the one incident that has always stayed about Aubrey's. And I mean, these realtors, I knew one of them, but I didn't know the other two. I always think that I wanted to finish my college education, and because I was busy working. But I have to be honest with you, I regret because we were starting to travel because after I had cancer, but I didn't. I've also made some bad choices that I regret for purchasing things that I didn't need. As far as any regrets with my family, I don't have any. I mean, I try to be myself. I I really, the college part was okay, but I think I've tried regrets to be more understanding of people or persons that are not very nice to me. And I regret that I haven't forgiven them. I mean, I've forgiven them, but I can't forget. And that doesn't happen very often because I would say for the most part, you know. But I would say right now I can't think of anything that I really regret not having included in my life. I really do. I think that some of my proudest moments have been when I'm bragging, but I've been given an award for being a volunteer with the American Cancer Society because I did that for many years, and that took a lot of, I felt good about it. I also got a lot of outstanding plaques when I worked for my work, so I felt that I was being recognized for my good hard work. And when I got my award from the American Cancer Society, and I think that's one of the pamphlets I showed you, um, I I was really called on stage almost to talk about my experience doing Reach to Recovery. Reach to Recovery is when you go to the hospital or the home and give some exercises to the person that has just had. So I would say that being recognized, and I could have done without the recognition, but being recognized was something I really, appreciated. I've traveled a lot. My first experience was when I went to Lourdes, France. I went to the grotto where Saint Bernadette had, buried, and I met the priest there. Well, we became friends, and he even came to Santa Fe to see him, Father Anselmo Sinola. And we communicated for a long time. When he came to Santa Fe, he wanted to show the film on Saint Bernadette. So that was quite an experience for me. We kept on that friendship. Um, in Spain, there was a lot of momentums, that I can remember. But this one of Lourdes was very special because I met the Archbishop. I have pictures with him. And Father Anselmo lived in the Bronx in New York City. But we corresponded for a long time. And, when I was in Lourdes, he took us over to the cemetery where St. Bernadette was buried. I mean, it was very helpful for somebody that knew what I was looking for, So, I mean, I've had a lot of good experience throughout, but to say that anything is specifically, I can't think of any now except for Father Sanola. Well, one of the countries that I visited was Italy, and I did get to meet the Pope, John the 23rd. That's a long time ago. I mean, I have so many favorites. And, like I said, I love Eastern Europe, Budapest, and, those places. Crystal and I went to Russia, like I said, and South Africa, Croatia. And I really enjoyed that trip. We went to a lot of things. So every trip has had something special. South America, again, Bolivia, because of the family there. And like I say, Japan by far is my most favorable experience. Uh, the I have a map showing all the places I've been to, and because I love traveling. I mean, that's my life right there, to travel. But I can think of all the places. I think I loved all of them. I went to the opera in Vienna, and met some interesting people, and I made the best out of a trip. I'm not doing too many now, and I'm going to slow down because for some, walking and so forth. But in my earlier days, I did a lot of traveling, and Charles did a lot of them with me, but not all of them. So I went to China through the Chamber of Commerce here in Santa Fe. It was really interesting, and but I would say the Orient, Japan. I mean, that's my favorite. China was okay. I wouldn't go back because it wasn't that significant. Cuba was interesting, since I knew the language, but it was very sad to see what they're going through, And like I said, it was very expensive. It really was. I think every trip has had something significantly in what has happened. But Japan comes of special interest to me because of the people, the well-dressed, modestly people, the helpful one, the food. I mean, I could go on and on and on about Japan. I mean, definitely, if I was younger, I'd go back, but I don't think I could do it again. So I think all of them have had a significant thing in my life. One of the countries that I like is Bolivia because we had family members there. And the only minus I would say is that the altitude was very high. And at night I'd have to sleep with oxygen because it was that high. But I think the experience was going to a wedding. They had the reception at the South Korean embassy that is vacated. And just meeting the people, so humble, really humble. And the people still dressed very traditionally with their round hats and things like that. The parents of the groom, my niece and her husband live in Albuquerque, were amazing. They did everything possible to make us. And I wish that I could have done more touring, but a lot of it was climbing hills and I didn't have my oxygen. I really hurt for oxygen. But other than that, I think it was the friendliness, the people, and the family. And then, of course, after Bolivia, we went on to Argentina and spent a week there. So that was an interesting place, too. Argentina, my niece rented a house there, and we were in Mendoza, so we went to visit all the vineyards. I mean, it was a lot of fun trip, it really was. I mean, I have made every trip a joy for me. I've only had 2 experiences that I wish I had never done because the people I was with were not very friendly, and I was sorry I did that. And another one, just 2 trips that I would say were my worst ones in the terms of my unhappiness, my eager to get home. In fact, when I was in Rome on my last trip, I called my husband and Crystal, I want to get home. How do I leave these people? But anyway, that was too something. But of all the trips I made, those are the only 2 that I would say were unpleasant. I mean, being able to get on the internet and corresponding with somebody, and all of a sudden you hear their voice, that was amazing for me. I was making some reservations for Australia and trying to, because, that was an independent trip. That amazed me. Also, the fact that much modern equipment has been, I mean, we're in a world of space. We really are. And those changes have an impact because I think most of them are for the best. I really do. The world that has changed that's very sad, and I'm not going to go into that, was a crime going on, the thieves, I went to a grocery store. Well, no, I went to Home Depot because I buy most of my odds and ends there. And they had to have all the areas where they have the soaps and all that locked up because, So a lot of places have closed because of the thieves, and that has those are the minuses. But the plus are the modern world and what they offer. The technology, the Catholic Church has changed a lot too. But there are some minuses there too. I think just about everything you think has minuses and pluses, but I try to highlight more on the pluses than the minuses. I get these beautiful notes from my daughter and my sibling, admiring my courage to go on. So they think courage is one of the biggest assets that I can live with them. And faith, to have faith is very important. So my next generation, like I said, the second, have learned a lot of the things that I have more or less not taught them, but exposed them to. And I think they appreciate that because they know that it's for the best. The same with my granddaughter. Aubrey. She writes me little notes saying, "Grandma, if it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't do this." And I mean, my two daughters are just granddaughters are so loving, and both of them speak Spanish, not fluently, but enough to get around. So I would say that strength, courage, faith, and love have left the impact on them. Of course, museums. I love to go to museum. Every museum I can go to. I love reading. I read both fiction and nonfiction. As far as hobbies, reading could be a hobby, and so could traveling could be a hobby, something I like. And going outside and enjoying the sun, the fresh air, is not necessarily a hobby, but it's something that I stay with, Painting or drawing, I'm not there yet. But I do a lot of research, and that's why I like the computer. I mean, like if a doctor says something and I'm not quite sure what he means, I look it up right away. So I think being a research person has helped me understand things a lot better. I have no relatives living in Santa Fe, but they're within an hour away, and it's very important because they look after me. I mean, my Crystal is my caregiver. My daughter calls me just about every other day, and to me, having that family, being close to me, means everything. I mean, at Christmas time, I would normally be alone, but they either come here or I go over there. If I didn't have them, I don't know, my friends are good, but they're not family. So the importance of family is to keep them until death do us apart. I have a trust, and I left all my trust to take care of my daughter and Crystal. So it's very important to have family, to communicate with them, to keep in touch, and to, again, I've been utilizing the train a lot because when they have something special in Albuquerque, I take the train. But I don't like to leave out special things, like baptisms and things like that. So family is very important to me. Well, Maria, I want to tell you that I miss you a lot. And I've always felt a guilt because when you were growing up, I don't think I gave you the attention that I wanted to because I was concentrating on my two young boys. And one time I asked you, "Maria, was I a good mother?" And she said, "Mother, I couldn't have wished for a better mom." And, life is too short. And as of the last 3 years, you've been calling me quite often. And I really look forward to these calls. And I guess the greatest gift, Maria, that you have given me is giving me two beautiful granddaughters that I'm very close to as I want to be with you, and I am. So, Maria, know that I'm going to leave this world loving you and thinking of all the beautiful things we've done together and hoping that your life goes on for many years and that you will always think of me as being your mother and loving me.
Whenever you're ready.
Aubrey, my granddaughter. I took care of you since almost you were a baby, and I'd like to see you more often, but I know you're a very busy lady. But I have wonderful memories of the time we spent together. And I want to let you know I love you very much. And the fact that I don't see you, it hurts, but I know it's not possible. But we do talk on the phone, and we do, visits once in a while. But Aubrey, you have a lot of strength. You're very strong. You're very educated, and you utilize your education to make a better life for yourself. You're a spiritual person, and I always want you to keep that spirituality because that's going to give you the strength that you may need at times. And going to Redlands to see you when you were in college made a very special time for me because I could see you happy. You never complained about anything, and you were the model student as far as I'm concerned. But again, you were my first grandchild, and I treasure every minute I stayed with you. Sometimes you would get upset with me. One time you were so upset with me, she said, I'm going to call my mother and have her take me home. So she picked up the phone and pretended that she was going to call her mom. But for the most part, we had a beautiful relationship. I love you, Aubrey, and I'll always have you in my heart. Rachel, I went to stay with your mom when you were born. You were a little preemie. I had to go home with oxygen, and I was concerned about you. I even took you to the Carmelites here to have them bless you because I was worried about you. But now, Rachel, that I've seen what you've grown to be, you're a genius, a straight-A student, asked to help teach classes, and you're amazing. And that counts a lot, but what counts more is the love you show me, the letters you send me. We do Zoom once in a while so we can see each other. And she's just a loving person, different personalities from Aubrey, but they love each other, And for a long time, Rachel did not know Aubrey, and she said, how's Sister Aubrey doing? But Rachel, I always think when you say sister, I think of a nun. But now that you've gotten closer to your sister, the relationship is good. And those times that you and I, Aubrey, spent in those Sundays in school, are never forget. So I want you to know that this grandma loves you so much, and that I respect you and admire you. And sometimes I think I go a little overboard bragging about you, showing your ranges, showing your score. But I'm so proud of you, I'm proud of Aubrey too, but you're just amazing, okay? And leaving you will always keep in mind that this grandma loves you very much. And I know you try to write to me in Spanish, and we do real good. And keep your strength and your independence and the love you have for your family. Crystal, I could go all afternoon speaking about niece Crystal, but she's, in a sense, my caregiver.
If you can, say it again, but remember you're speaking directly to Crystal.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
So don't refer to it in the third person.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Crystal, I want you to know that without your existence, I wouldn't be here. Crystal, you have done everything to help me, whether I have a surgery. We've traveled together, Crystal, and those were very enjoyable trips. And I love going to your house because one of the things I want to do when I get there is organize your drawers, cooking drawers. And I think you like that too. But Crystal, more important that I love is that you've always taken care of me. You call me every morning. When I had the 2 surgeries, you came and stayed with me. So what can I say about you that without you, I probably wouldn't exist, really. And I love the fact that you're fun and you're everything that I would want to have in my life. And your daughters and your son have been just as close to me as you are. They care for me. They don't care that I'm 40 years older or 50 than them. They call me to check on me. So you're leaving a beautiful lesson too, Crystal, with your daughters and with me. Just know that I will love you always, and I will always be there for you if you need me, as you have been there for me, Crystal. So with this, I say, Crystal, I love you very much. Pat and John, I want you to know that you have been very special in my life. The fact that I'm a stepmother did not make any difference to you. You treat me as a real mother. You always come and help me. And one time I mentioned to you, John, when you come, let's do a little vacation. No, you use me because that's why I come to help you. He's very much into kindness, helpfulness. And Pat, like I say, to me, I don't even like to think of her being a stepdaughter. I like to think of her as being my daughter because she's very close to me. So Pat and John know that this grandma and mother appreciates you very much, and you will always know that I'm here for you too. One of my messages is to my family and my close friends. I want you to know that you have made a better person out of me by just being my friends and family. As you know my life pretty much, there has been some sorrowful moments and some happy moments. But I want you all to know that without your friendship and family love, I would have been a different person in hopefully not too bad ways, but I am a better person because all of you have offered something very special in my life. You know, I talked about my friends being a big influence, but one of the things I do want to say that in my later life, and I'm talking maybe the last 10, 15 years, I have met some really close friends that have had a significant impact on my life, you know? I mean, I meet young people and I meet older people. But I want to mention you, Vince, because you and your friends were always so respectful, so grateful. And, you know, you're one of the young generations. I've also met some young women and men. For instance, that call I just got from Marvin. He's young, and but, you know, we become friends, you know. So I think, to me, it's important that friendship stays and they don't go away. And going back to my dad saying, friends are more important than money. Although it helps to have both of them. Okay, that's it, yeah.